"You've ruined our lives." That's what my sister screamed at me right in front of my parents, and they didn't defend me. They nodded. "Hi, I'm Rachel. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just packed my bag and walked out of the only home I'd ever known. No one called. No one chased me. But this morning, I woke up to 15 missed calls, so... What changed? Have you ever been erased by the people who were supposed to love you? Share your story in the comments. I'm listening. "You've ruined our lives." Madison's voice cracked like glass. She stood in the center of the living room, still lit by the soft glow of her ring light, her hands clenched into perfect manicured fists. I didn't move. My mug of lukewarm tea trembled slightly in my grip, not from shock, but from the sheer familiarity of it all. Across from her, my parents sat on the cream sectional eyes forward like they were watching a sad but necessary episode of someone else's life. And when Madison turned to them for backup, something inside me already knew what was coming. "Susan," my mother nodded. "She's right," she said, brushing invisible lint from her slacks. "Every time something good happens, you find a way to darken it." There it was. I had darkened her daughter's latest moment of social media glory. Apparently, my mere presence had the gravitational pull of a black hole. I didn't argue. I didn't even look at Madison. I just stared into my tea, watching the thin swirl of cream float like a cloud about to vanish. Mom once told me, "Some people just drain the joy from a room." She was slicing tomatoes in the kitchen when she said it. I remember the way she placed each slice on the plate, like they were meant for display, not consumption. At the time, I didn't know she was talking about me. Now I did. The air in the house clung to my skin, late summer humidity mixed with the artificial cool of central AC and the charged silence of disapproval. I set the mug down gently on the side table. It left a faint ring. Madison turned back to her camera, her face smoothing out into that practiced smile, as if the eruption had never happened. She was already live again, thanking her followers for sharing this huge milestone and promising a giveaway once we hit under 25K. Her voice bounced around the room with a brightness I didn't recognize. Dad rubbed the bridge of his nose like it was all just too much, but he didn't say a word. He never did. I stood, walked past them slowly. Neither of them looked up. I could have screamed, and they probably would have asked me to keep my voice down. My room. Well, the guest room still smelled like someone else's detergent and a citrus-scented candle that had long since burned out. I moved robotically. Old college backpack from the closet, 2 shirts, toothbrush, chargers, 1 paperback I'd started and never finished. I didn't pack anything sentimental, no framed photos, no letters, no last-minute glances in the mirror. 15 minutes later, I opened the front door. The night air was thick and humming cicadas filling the silence my family had left behind. I walked the 2 blocks to the gas station, bought a granola bar and a bottle of water. I wasn't hungry, I just didn't know what else to do with my hands. The clerk didn't look at me when I asked about the bus. "Last one's in 7, maybe 8 minutes, he muttered. I waited, sat on the metal bench outside, feeling the coldness of it seep through my jeans. My backpack sat between my feet like a pet I didn't want but couldn't abandon. When the bus came, it exhaled as it stopped. I got on without looking back. No one else did either. The ride into downtown Asheville was quiet. Streetlights passed like slow blinks through the fogged-up window. I watched the reflections, bars closing delivery trucks groaning past one couple, arguing in a parking lot without using words. When we reached the terminal, I walked. Not far, just enough to find a beige motel with flickering signage that promised Wi-Fi and privacy. I didn't need either. I just needed somewhere not to be seen. The man at the desk didn't ask questions. He handed me a key card with a number written in Sharpie over an old smudge. I paid with my last $42 in cash. The room smelled like bleach, trying to hide something older, cigarette smoke maybe, or regret. I dropped my backpack on the bed, sat down slowly. The mattress groaned. The ceiling above me had a water stain the shape of a broken star. I stared at it until my eyes watered. Still no calls, no texts. Not a "where are you?" or even a "why." But the silence wasn't empty. It was weighted. Like being wrapped in a wet towel straight from the washer, clingy, cold, and heavy in all the wrong places. I lay down on top of the sheets, shoes still on. I didn't plan to sleep. I just wanted to stop holding my body upright. My phone was face down on the nightstand. No buzz, no ring. And then, just as I was drifting, it vibrated. I sat up, heart pounding, not from hope, just muscle memory. I flipped the screen. A notification, not a call, not a message. Just a reminder, your Mother's Day gift was delivered 2 years ago, a gift she never opened. A silk scarf monogrammed with her initials. I'd picked it out, wrapped it myself, and paid extra for shipping. She never said thank you, never even mentioned it. That scarf was probably still in some drawer beneath expired coupons and broken pens. Just like me. They never opened it. They never opened me. I woke up before the sun. The room smelled like damp curtains and old bleach, and my back ached from the springs in the mattress pressing through the thin foam. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 5:43 a.m. I had $270 and some change, a motel key with the room number written in fading Sharpie and no plan. I took a slow breath and sat up, blinking at the water stain in the ceiling, same place I'd fallen asleep staring at. It still looked like a broken star. Nothing had changed except now it was morning and I was still here. There was a small cafe down the block, the kind that always opened early for the local construction crews and night shift nurses. The chalkboard out front promised bottomless coffee for $1.79s and bacon, or hope depending on the morning. I chose both. Inside, it smelled like burnt toast and floor cleaner. I slid into a booth near the outlet and plugged in my phone. The signal was weak, but it was enough. I opened the dusty folder marked Career Stuff and tapped on a profile I hadn't touched in 3 years, my old tutoring account. It still had my photo from grad school with bangs I thought made me look serious. I updated my availability, changed the zip code, and rewrote the headline. Patient, detail-oriented, specializing in SAT, GED, and college prep. Under About Me, I wrote, I believe in showing up even when no one else does. The cafe server refilled my cup 3 times without saying a word. I appreciated that more than she knew. By noon, I'd submitted 16 applications. Parents looking for help. Students drowning in pressure. Teenagers trying to write college essays without sounding like robots. I understood them in ways my own family never cared to understand me. I walked to the library 2 blocks away. They had free Wi-Fi and a system where you could check out Chromebooks for 2-hour blocks. I signed my name on the clipboard with a shaky pen and a steadier hand. Back at the motel that night, I lined up the paper receipt from the cafe and scrawled notes in the margins, 1 client booked, then another. By the end of the week, I had 3 steady sessions. The pay wasn't much, but I tracked every dollar. I even wrote thank you on the back of the envelope, holding the cash, just to remind myself that not everything people give you has to hurt. The motel felt less like a cage and more like a waiting room I could outgrow. On the 5th morning, I found a flyer near the vending machine. Shared rental space, quiet tenants preferred. I called the number. The landlord asked if I was loud. I said no. She asked if I smoked. I said not since college, and only out of heartbreak. She laughed and said the room was mine if I could pay first month plus deposit. I moved in the next afternoon. It was a converted attic with sloped ceilings and a window the size of a pizza box. The walls were thin and the floorboards creaked like they had secrets, but the door locked. It was mine. That night, I sat on the edge of the twin bed with my laptop balanced on a pillow. I was halfway through helping a junior with his personal essay when a message popped up from an old college friend. It was just a link, no context, no subject line. It was a photo. Susan and Madison standing under a string of golden fairy lights, holding glasses of sparkling water with lemon wedges. The caption read, Family First. So proud of this one, I stared at it longer than I should have. In the background behind their perfect poses was a framed photo on the wall. A new family picture. Same living room, same wall. But I wasn't in it. They'd replaced the old one, the one from when I was 16 wearing braces and a blue dress I'd sewn myself, with this new glossy version. Mom, Dad, Madison. Even the dog they adopted after I left. It was like I had never existed. I closed the tab and opened another browser window. Anything to keep my hands busy. Anything to stop that old ache from blooming. Then came another email. This time from a PR agency I vaguely recognized. The subject line was Podcast Collaboration Resilient Families. I almost deleted it without reading until I noticed I'd been CC'd. It was Madison's pitch. She was proposing an episode about family dynamics, overcoming conflict, and choosing joy. I scanned down until I reached the final paragraph. One line stood out, highlighted in my mind, like someone had taken a highlighter to my brain. Please exclude Rachel. She's emotionally unstable, and we've spent years rebuilding our family image. My hands froze on the trackpad. Emotionally unstable. I wasn't even angry. I wasn't surprised. Just tired. Grandma once told me, you're not loud, but you're steady. That's the kind that rebuilds things. She said it after I helped fix the leg of her dining room chair, the one everyone else said to throw out. I didn't throw things out. I tried, even when it wasn't wise, even when it wasn't returned. I reached for the same receipt I'd been tracking my payments on and flipped it over. Under tutoring, $55. I wrote something new, rebuilding, quietly. Outside, the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Somewhere out there, Madison was building an image, and I was building a life. Difference is, mine didn't need filters. They took everything I made and scrubbed out my name, but not my voice. That was still mine. It was a Tuesday morning when Layla showed up. I hadn't seen her in nearly 2 years. She was the kind of friend who quietly drifts when life gets complicated, like steam from a coffee cup always present until you look away. I was working through a math diagnostic when the knock came, soft, hesitant. My first instinct was to ignore it. No one knocked on my door without texting first, and I'd grown used to silence being my safest boundary, but something told me to open it. She stood there, hair pulled back in a loose twist, wearing a hoodie that looked 3 days old. Her hands were wrapped around a dish towel, and she held it like it contained a bomb. Or a confession. "Oh, Dylan," she said, quiet, almost unsure. "They told me you were spiraling. I didn't believe them. But then I found this." I stepped aside without a word. She crossed the threshold like she was afraid the floor might reject her. She placed the bundle on my kitchenette counter and unwrapped it gently. Inside was a small envelope, cream-colored, slightly bent. My name written in my own handwriting from a time when my script still curved. "I found it in your mom's desk," she whispered, "under a pile of expired coupons. Still sealed." I didn't speak. My hands shook, but only slightly, like my body was trying to catch up with my heart. "I wasn't snooping," she added quickly. "I was dropping something off for Madison. They had me waiting in the kitchen." I nodded and picked it up. It was the birthday card I'd sent my mother last year. I remembered saving up for the gift card to her favorite coffee shop. I'd written a note inside about second chances, about maybe trying again. She never opened it. I slid a fingernail under the flap. The glue gave way without resistance. Inside was the card, pale pink with gold foil trim. I unfolded the note. "Mom, if there's still a space in your heart for me, I'd like to sit there again. I'm not asking for everything, just a call back. I miss our Tuesday talks. I miss you." It was all still there. Every word. Untouched. Layla stood across from me, arms folded like a shield. "That's not the worst of it," she said finally. "Madison launched a tutoring platform last month. She's calling it Bright Path Academy." I recognized everything, your tone, your diagrams, even the layout. My stomach dropped. She pulled a few printed pages from her tote bag and spread them on the table. My writing, my rubrics, my formatting, just under a different name, her name. "She said you gave it to her," Layla added. "Said you wanted to be behind the scenes," I laughed. A short, breathless sound. She never even asked. I opened my laptop and clicked through my old files. Cross-referenced dates, document titles, PDFs I'd backed up years ago. It was all mine. Created, edited, and time-stamped long before Madison had even started tutoring. I opened a folder I hadn't touched in a while, one labeled Legacy. Inside was a subfolder marked Grandma. My breath caught. There it was. A scan of Grandma Lorraine's will. I barely remembered uploading it. The file name was Clumsy Will, Final Copy Reel This One, like I hadn't trusted my own organization. The scan opened slowly, page by page, until I reached the clause. Her familiar cursive, now digitized but still unmistakable. All educational materials, curriculum templates, and intellectual property created or co-developed with Odell and Shipley shall remain solely hers. My name. Clear as ink. Signed. Witnessed. Dated 5 years ago. My eyes stung. Not from sadness, from clarity. I printed it out at the public library down the street. Added the scan to the growing wall above my desk. First the unopened letter, then Madison's rebranded documents. Now the will. I stood back and looked at them. 3 papers, 3 truths. 3 reminders that what I created mattered, even if they'd spent years trying to pretend otherwise. Grandma once wrote me in the margins of a thank you card, "You will build what no one sees today. But one day, they'll notice." That evening, I made tea with the last peppermint bag I had left. The water never quite boiled in my rusted electric kettle, but I didn't care. As I settled into my chair laptop, open to a half-finished lesson plan, a notification pinged in the corner of my screen. Your professional website has been flagged for copyright violation. A claim has been submitted regarding proprietary educational content. I stared at it. The sender was anonymized, but I didn't need the IP address. I already knew. I leaned back, heart-steady fingers curled around the warm mug. They wanted me gone. Again. But this time I wasn't 15. I wasn't crying behind the garage. I wasn't writing apology cards for things I didn't break. This time I had proof. And I had a voice. And I wasn't going anywhere. They only ever show up when things are burning and expect me to hold the hose. The first missed call came at 6:12 a.m. I didn't hear it. My phone was charging across the room, face down on the old IKEA dresser I'd had since college. The second came at 6:14. By the time I poured my second cup of coffee, the count was up to 9. I didn't check the voicemails until the 14th. It was my father's voice, hoarse, hesitant. "Rachel? It's Dad. I know things have been strained, but Madison's in trouble. Some blog picked up the plagiarism story. It's spreading fast. She's saying it's all a misunderstanding. But we need your help to calm things down. We, not her, not Madison. We." I didn't respond. Instead, I gathered every piece of paper I had printed, every email, every screenshot, every timestamp. I stacked them into neat piles, evidence not of revenge, but of truth. I slipped them into a manila folder I'd labeled Proof in blue ink, like it needed reminding. It was cold that morning. Asheville was wrapped in the kind of sharp air that makes your breath visible. I wore 2 scarves and still felt the wind slice through the sleeves of my coat. The bus ride to Atlanta was long, the kind where the windows fog and the hum of the engine becomes background noise to the ache behind your eyes. Deborah King's office was on the 6th floor of a brick building that smelled like new carpet and peppermint hand sanitizer. She greeted me with a firm handshake and eyes that scanned faster than they blinked. She didn't waste time. I laid out the documents one by one on the polished desk. The clause in Grandma's will. The side-by-side screenshots of my work and Madison's site. The email from the PR agency. The original drafts with metadata intact. Deborah read in silence, lips pressed into a thin, deliberate line. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair, hands folded. "This isn't a debate," she said. "It's ownership." Her voice didn't rise, but it carried the weight of something immovable. We spent the next 2 hours discussing options. Not lawsuits yet, but protection visibility and documentation, a public record that didn't require a headline to be real. When I got back to Asheville, the sky was already bruising toward evening. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, slowly numb from the hours of sitting, the hours of remembering. The lights were already on inside. For a second, I thought maybe I'd forgotten to turn them off. But then I heard the knock. 3 firm taps. I opened the door just enough to see the hallway. Susan stood closest. Her lipstick was faded at the edges. Dad stood behind her, expression unreadable. Madison leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyeliner smudged. No one spoke first. So I did. You could have called. Susan looked away. We did. I meant before things caught fire. Madison shifted her weight. We didn't come to fight. I let the silence answer. We want to fix this, Dad said gently. Together. As a family. I blinked. Now you want a team project? Susan stepped forward. Madison's getting death threats. People are calling her a thief. She is a thief, I said, voice quiet but steady. Rachel. Susan said, her tone rehearsed. This doesn't have to get uglier. Let's resolve it. Internally. Internally. Like a rash. Like a scandal. I stepped back just far enough to close the door halfway. Just wide enough for my words to fit. This time I said slowly, I'm not the one fixing your mess. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I simply closed it with a soft final click. The kind of sound that carries more weight than a shout. Inside the apartment was still warm. The peppermint candle flickered on the windowsill. I curled up in the chair near the heater, the folder still on my lap. That night I slept better than I expected. But the morning brought its own smoke. I flipped open my laptop with the usual rhythm emails, sessions, lesson plans. But the homepage of my tutoring site blinked red. Your platform has been temporarily suspended due to a copyright claim submitted by an anonymous source. I stared at the screen, not surprised, not shaken, just still. They weren't done. They tried to wipe my name clean off my own work. But I had something they didn't: receipts. The first thing I did was turn off the heat. Not because I wanted to be cold, but because the quiet hum of the radiator distracted me. I needed silence, not the kind my family gave me, but the kind that let your thoughts line up in perfect order. I sat at the small table in the corner of my apartment where the light bulb above buzzed faintly and the window breathed fog every time I exhaled. On the surface, it looked like a regular Thursday, but I was preparing for war. Except this time, I didn't raise my voice. I raised a folder. It was labeled Counterclaim. Inside chronological screenshots, drafts saved years ago with metadata, original rubrics typed at 1 a.m. during my grad school days. Color-coded notes, comparative layouts, even the footer on one worksheet that still bore the quote Grandma used to repeat, "Build with care, not flash." Mom once scoffed Rachel documents everything, like it matters. I built a new folder, this one digital, uploaded every file into a secured drive, timestamps intact, shared view-only access with Deborah. She replied within 15 minutes. This is airtight. Proceed if ready. At 3:12 p.m., I turned on my desk lamp, pulled the curtain shut, adjusted my webcam. No makeup, no filter, just a black turtleneck and the quiet resolve of someone who had nothing left to prove. I pressed record. My voice didn't tremble. Hi, my name is Rachel Ellis. I'm an educator and curriculum designer. A few months ago, my intellectual property was used without my consent. I was accused of stealing my own work. This video is not an attack. It's documentation. I held up the printed clause from Grandma's will. Read it aloud, every word, including her signature. Then I shared my screen. Slide by slide, I displayed the original materials. Timestamps from 2019. Drafts in Google Docs. Rubrics developed while interning at a nonprofit in Dallas. Color schemes that matched the site Madison had claimed as her own. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I just showed. Then I looked into the lens and said, sometimes silence is mistaken for guilt. But sometimes silence is strategy. I've been quiet long enough. I clicked upload. By sunset, my phone buzzed nonstop. A mother I'd tutored last fall commented, "This woman helped my daughter pass her GED. We owe her everything." A teacher from Michigan reposted my video with the caption, "Protect your fellow educators. IP theft is real." A student I'd mentored during college wrote, "Rachel believed in me when I couldn't write a complete sentence. She never asked for credit, just that I try again." Within 24 hours, the video had 47,000 views. Not viral, but loud in its own way. The next morning, an envelope arrived. Certified mail. The label had no return address, but the handwriting was precise, legal precise. I opened it at the table next to my now cold cup of chamomile tea. Inside was a 6-figure check, the kind that could wipe my debts cover 2 years of rent and maybe fix the clunky hinge on my front door. Beneath it, a letter. In light of recent confusion, we propose a mutual resolution. In exchange for withdrawing your claims, removing your video, and agreeing to a confidentiality clause, full credit and ownership will be reinstated retroactively. Attached was an NDA non-disclosure agreement spanning 6 pages. They weren't apologizing. They were purchasing silence. I read it twice. Once as the girl who used to write letters hoping they'd get opened. Then again as the woman who no longer needed her voice to be invited to the table. I didn't tremble. I didn't rage. I walked to the drawer by the fridge and pulled out the small paper shredder I'd bought at a second-hand shop the same week I moved in. It had only ever been used on junk mail. I fed the check in first, then the NDA, then the envelope it all came in. The blades hummed quietly like a lullaby to a version of myself that used to beg for peace. I looked at the empty feed tray, then at the glow from my laptop screen. They offered money for my silence. I chose something louder. They replaced the family photo, removed me from the frame. But this is something they can't erase. It was June now, the kind of summer that clings to your skin before the sun's even up. My new apartment didn't have central air, just a window unit that wheezed like it had seen things, and a tiny home office wedged between the kitchen and a view of the city bus stop. That window became my compass. I shredded the NDA days ago. After the blades finished their work, I sat in the stillness watching the last curl of paper settle like ash. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something deeper and end, not of the story, but of the part of me that kept waiting to be called back in. I posted a still image later that evening. Black background, my name in white font. Below it my credentials listed plainly. No slogans, no hashtags. Just a caption, "You don't owe silence to those who erased you." Then I logged off. The next morning, I launched something that felt more permanent than anger, the Lorraine Monroe Scholarship. Small, local, modest in funding, but boundless in intent. A yearly grant for students who needed someone to believe in their words, just as Grandma once believed in mine. The first thank you notes came in folded notebook paper and email text without punctuation. I printed them all. "You were the first person who made me feel like I wasn't dumb. Thank you for not giving up." I pinned it beside Grandma's letter, the one she'd written years ago where she told me, "You'll build what no one sees today, but one day they'll see." Next to those 2 papers, I hung the clause from her will. Not because I needed proof anymore, but because legacy deserves to live on walls, not courtrooms. That afternoon, I prepared a simple envelope. No return address, no explanation. Inside was a single slip of paper with Grandma's quote. I mailed it to a girl I'd tutored back at the library, quiet, scared, and always apologizing for being too much. I hoped maybe one day she'd open it when she needed to remember she wasn't too much. She was just enough. Then I brewed a cup of peppermint tea, opened the window, let in the hum of a city that didn't know my name and didn't need to. A bus stopped. A teenager ran to catch it bag flapping behind him like a flag. Life kept moving. I sat at my desk, feet tucked under me laptop, open to a blank document. I didn't write for applause. I wrote because I could. Because I finally had space that was mine. A desk. A window. A name that didn't need to be defended, only lived. There was no phone call, no email, no apology tucked in lowercase letters, just quiet. And for the first time, it didn't feel like exile. It felt like freedom. On the wall, 3 papers fluttered slightly under the breeze, the thank you note, Grandma's letter, and the clause that had once saved me when words wouldn't. I didn't need a frame. I had a foundation. And this time, I was finally still. They took me out of the frame, but I built one they couldn't crop. Not to prove anything, just to remember who I am without their permission. Sometimes healing isn't loud. It's in the quiet act of choosing yourself, of mailing kindness into the world without needing a reply. Family isn't defined by last names or old photos. It's who shows up when you're building from nothing. If this story reminded you of someone you once were or someone you love, feel free to share your thoughts. Sometimes your voice is the one someone else is still afraid to use.